we're moving on to 1985. Kingsman goes 7-3, 5-2 in the Northern Indiana Conference. A couple overtime games in this one. An overtime win against Elston. Overtime loss to Elkhart Memorial. Doesn't happen very often. Heartbreaking loss at home against the Snyder Panthers. That may have been Mike Hawley's, or was that Russ Isaacs' team?
That was Mike's.
Okay,
Coach
so let's talk about 1985.
Well, really, I mean, he got a little banged up and that year. And I remember doing some stuff defensively, trying to keep people from scoring and trying to find ways to win ball games, Don and Dad and I, and really it was a tough season. I mean, we had some naturally you think of the tough losses, but those guys were in probably a heck of a lot more games than people would even thought they should have been in that year, as far as what we had in personnel wise and what happened with some of our guys.
I was going to ask Matt a question. I want to make sure I get my facts right. The loss to Memorial.
Adams or Memorial?
The loss to Memorial, was that the last conference loss before the streak started?
Yes.
Was it Memorial
Yes.
before Adams?
Adams was the last South Bend team.
Yeah.
You played
Right.
Adams before, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then Memorial.
Okay,
Memorial was 10-7, right?
Right.
Right.
That was the last NIC team.
That was Del Rims.
Until Mishawaka
Okay.
in
Okay.
09.
Good guy.
Okay, so getting back to 1985, that September 27th game, overtime loss to Elkhart Memorial was the last Northern Indiana Conference loss for a generation. That's an awful long time. But once again, the mindset of the coaching staff, as you alluded to many times, is prepare for an 0-10 team versus a 10-0 team. Did you have any inkling that you were going to have to take this dominance of this league over at this point in time? Or you
No, you know what? The whole plan is always try to win the next ball game. That's it. It's not. I mean, we have high expectations every year, but the way you make a run is by winning the next ball game, and I think that's the secret. I just, you don't worry about 1,000 games down the road. You worry about who you're playing now, because there's only one team you can beat on a given week, and there's only one team you can lose to on a given week, and that's the team you're playing. So you better be ready for them.
85 began a stretch of a 3-year period where you played Fort Wayne Snyder and that great coaching staff over there. Obviously a 13-12 loss in this one, and then followed by a 28-0 loss, which was one of the worst losses, Chris says, of all time. And then, of course, you guys were able to bounce back a couple years later in 87 to beat them. So let's just talk about the long-time relationship with that another great coaching staff at Fort Wayne Snyder and that difficult 13-12 loss to Snyder.
Well, I mean, great team, and they have some guys that can definitely play the game, and great athletes, physical game. And I mean, I can remember being down in the end zone and running a speed option on us and scored, and it was a hard fought game, and we had our shot. You know what I mean? And they made the play, and but he had great players and more importantly, great staff. And at that time, the relationship wasn't there between the staff at Snyder and Penn, but as those years went on and on and on, Coach, very similar to what was happening at Penn, Coach Hawley steps down and Ike takes over. Just like now, and Ike stepped down and Coach Tittman's taken over. Great program, guys that love the game of football, and guys that weren't scared to share, just like ourselves. And we would get together multiple times and meet and talk and ask each other questions about offense, defense, and special teams, and more importantly, how to handle kids that are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old.
Disappointing from a record standpoint. 3 losses is kind of an oddity, but you guys bounced back. And now let's talk about 1986. You guys run off 10 straight wins to get the season started before losing to Fort Wayne Snyder. Talk about rebounding, Cory, from a down year for the Kingsmen with 3 losses to running off to a 10-0 start. I
got on a great run, and personally what I kind of remember, that was my group that I'd had since they were sophomores. You know what I mean? That group of defensive linemen, the TNT guys, Bob Tidy and Darren Curtis and Dave Middleton and Kobe Krieger kind of backed those 3 guys up. Great bond, very close to those guys now. Unfortunately, we've lost Darren, but able to spend some time with him in his last couple of days, and what an impact player he was, and all those guys were, and the guys around him. I mean, Randy Schneider on the offensive side of the ball went on to a great career in Indiana, being a captain there, and yeah, just great football players that played the game very well together. And you know what? That was a special group. When you make a run like that, you have to have great senior leadership, and we had it that year.
Okay, on the road at Snyder, 28-0 loss, and it doesn't sit well with Chris because he hasn't had very many like that. Where, I mean, you can probably count on one hand how many times he got beat by more than 20 in his career. But let's just talk about the Snyder loss. What was learned?
Well, we came off a great season, undefeated regular season. You know, that was started on that track, and that was exciting, and took that next step. But then what was there and what took place in that? I mean, how do you play against speed and getting ready for speed and doing all that? It's a close game that they kind of took over late and got after us later in the ball game. But they had some great skill position people and played great defense as well because of how they were coached naturally. But they had some guys, you know, Rollbrocker at linebacker and played some fullback as well. Tough physical kid that later turned on, you know, to be a heck of a coach for them and later at other high schools as well.
When you look at the start by your defense was outstanding. You gave up 7 points to LaSalle in 4 of the first 5 games. It was shutouts, touchdown, and a touchdown against Raleigh and Mishawaka. So really, until the Elkhart Central game, where you gave up more than double-digit points, so defensively they had to be a great unit.
It was a great unit, and it was a group that kind of had to play a little bit early. If we go back and we take a look at the team the year before, you know what I mean? Those guys got some playing time in, and maybe got on the field a little bit earlier than maybe some of the guys in the past had. But that paid dividends for us, and they were in some big games as younger players, and I think that made them better players as seniors. And again, we had some great players that went on collegiately and played, but all those guys that played together, those 11 guys were outstanding.
All right, 1987 sectional champs, 11-1. Won the Northern Indiana Conference again, going away. The last game of the season ended with a 28-14 loss at Carmel. I guess that was Coach Belden at the time.
Yes, Coach Belden.
So we'll talk about that game, but you know, this is an interesting season in regard because the defense, and I know this is always a sore spot with you, gave up 20 on one occasion, 32, and I heard about this double overtime game between Northside and Penn, 39-32. We got to talk about that great game.
Well, well, let's just start right there. And you know, we had a heck of a defense the year before, so we had a lot of new faces. We graduated some guys, but hey, the expectation is for the position, not the player. So we're not going to use that as an excuse. But I can remember playing in that North game, and it was a wild game at Northside. And I can remember in the first overtime, first or second, they'd scored, and we were down. We came back and made it a ball game late in the ball game. We weren't playing real well the early part of that game, and the Gold Rush came back and made it a game and tied it up. And I can remember them scoring, and I think they went for 2, and they made the 2-point conversion. And I can remember being on the sideline with Geese and turning around and looking at him and saying, "Hey, go get him." He's kind of looked at me with a blank stare. Like, man, I've got to, not only do I have to score, but we've got to score a 2-point conversion just to play another overtime. So naturally, I was probably fired, but I think he was dumbfounded by my statement, and luckily, he didn't fire me that night, at least at that particular moment.
There were people back home that had left the game, or actually, Chris tells the story about
Tim
people.
Sharp, yeah. Tim, he had his wife Mary, who was another Penn grad, and great friends, and you know, all 3 of the Sharp boys, Jim, Mike, and Tim, had all played there. And Nancy was in my class; she was a cheerleader there, and naturally, their mom and dad, huge Penn fans, and you know, A's Reynolds done such a great job with supporting Penn football for all these years as well, their family, the Sharp family. But Tim and Mary were at the game, and it was a blowout, and we're down by about 3 touchdowns, it seems like, 18 points or whatever. So Tim and Mary want to beat the rush and leave Fort Wayne and get back to home at a decent hour. And he happened to get in his car and start driving, and I had to say, well, I'll just find out what's going on in the game. And it was overtime. He said, "What the heck happened?" So we just missed a great ball game.
All right, when you look at the year of '87 and some of the I mean, you ran through the Fort Wayne, Northside, Northrop, Snyder, and then of course you lose on the road at Carmel. What do you remember about Jim Belden's squad and how far this group had come? As you alluded to, lost I mean, expectations were not high coming into this with all the graduation losses from the year before.
Well, I mean, just that run in itself. Now, running through Fort Wayne, it's a tough nut to crack. Let's put it that way. We had to beat a Northside team that had beat us in 1984 after we won the state championship and knocked us out of the playoffs. We had to beat a Snyder team that had beaten us. And getting those wins and a very talented Northrop team as well, it was a heck of a run. And got a sectional championship, which was great. It was a heck of a reward. We're very, very happy. And but then what was waiting for us, that was a great team that Coach Belden had down there that we had to play at Carmel.
Okay.